Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Vegan World 2026 Moonshot podcast. And today we are joined by Erica Fleury of the North American Primate Sanctuary Alliance. Let me introduce her to you.
Hi, thank you so
Yes.
much for having me.
Good morning, Erica. Thank you for being here.
Good morning.
It is such a touching story what is happening to the animals, to the chimpanzees. So, what does the North American Primate Sanctuary Alliance do?
We are a coalition of 10 of the leading primate sanctuaries on the continent who care for over 820 rescued and retired primates. And that includes over 700 chimpanzees, as well as many monkeys. And all those animals came to sanctuaries because they needed housing after being used in biomedical research, the entertainment industry, or the pet trade. So because those are the sources of so much suffering and negative animal welfare for these beings, and because the demand on sanctuaries far exceeds the space, NAPSA is also very committed to advocacy work to educate the public about the responsible treatment of these animals, their needs, their lifetime, what it takes to properly care for these animals long term, which makes it very clear then why they're not suitable for the pet trade or for entertainment or biomedical research. So we're really hoping and working hard to end the exploitation of primates wherever it occurs. And then in the meantime, we also field many requests to house primates in our sanctuaries. NAPSA member sanctuaries are all accredited and licensed, and really give these animals the absolute best life outside of life in the wild, because they can't go to life in the wild. And so we were approached when the wildlife way station shut its doors as the solution for these chimpanzees that truly had nowhere else to go. And then Sean thankfully stepped in, Sean Monson, with his film that you just saw, and is helping us and joining the community, spreading the word about this important need. And hopefully we can get these animals out soon and get them saved and into good homes at accredited sanctuaries as soon as possible.
Where are the animals now?
They're still at the Wildlife Way Station. So that is a refuge outside of Los Angeles. They shut in 2019, as you heard on the film. And when they shut, chimpanzee sanctuaries were at capacity. They just quite simply, they didn't have enclosures built to accommodate this unexpected need. So the fundraiser was put together to raise the money so that these trusted and experienced sanctuaries could expand to take the animals. And we knew it would take time. So the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, thankfully, had stepped in to oversee the immediate care of the animals. And that is certainly no small feat, because when the way station shut down initially, there were 480 animals living there of all species, domestic, exotic, everything under the sun, basically. And California Department of Fish and Wildlife oversaw the placement of most of those animals at sanctuaries. However, the chimpanzees remained, and there were 42 initially. Right now, there are still 26 chimpanzees. We've rehomed 15, and one elderly chimp passed away of natural causes, and we've got 26 left. So, we have solutions for them, for most of them, and we can move as many as 15 this fall, actually, but it's all pending the funding coming in, and that's where the fundraiser is really pushing hard this fall so that we can get those chimps out to safety.
Okay, so currently the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is taking care of the chimpanzees in Wayside. Is that correct?
They're paying the bill for all of their needs, and that includes everything from utilities to security. It's quite a bit. Last estimate, it was $100,000 a month to care for the 26 chimps that remain. There are the chimpanzees have long-term caregivers that have known them decades, and we're so incredibly grateful that those people have stayed there to care for the chimps, and that the way station is still able to pay their salaries, and keep that running in the meantime, while we get the chimps out in their social groups slowly.
Right.
Much slower than we would have wanted, but it's happening regardless.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard that the animal experimentation that they do with these primates has absolutely no benefit whatsoever.
There's different opinions on that. I'm
Okay.
not a scientist. I'm not going to profess to have all the answers. But
Mm-hmm.
what I can tell you from a primate, the experts that are in NAPSA and that run these sanctuaries and that care for these animals are unified in saying that life in the laboratory is not in the best interest of the animals that are at stake. And I mean, this is the entire lifetime of a being. I think to some people, the numbers are so vast that it can be hard to really understand what that means on an individual basis when there's, 200,000 monkeys in laboratories right now. But if that was you, and if you were confined to living in a small box and being tested on and it hurts and you don't feel well and all the, it's pretty upsetting. And so when these animals are retired to sanctuaries, it's a real win. They don't all make it to sanctuaries. Some get recycled into other studies. Some are euthanized. And so the sanctuaries are able to provide individualized care to these animals who each have unique needs. Some of these chimpanzees that came from the way station who are now rehomed at these amazing sanctuaries, they're afraid to touch the grass because they've never been on grass. They weren't on grass at the way station and they weren't on grass in the laboratory. So to them, concrete feels good and right and safe, and that's what they want. And so it's challenging to get them to trust the process and know that they're safe now and to not be afraid of these things that we would think they should innately love, but they weren't raised like a chimpanzee normally would be. And that's the problem. Then they have lifetime issues because of it, mental problems, physical problems, etc. Just like you or I would if we were raised in a small cage somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you said there are 200,000 monkeys in laboratories right now.
I don't have the most recent numbers, but it's hundreds of thousands. I can say with confidence. Yes. Yeah. Chimpanzees are no longer being tested on in laboratories, and that's wonderful. Some are still living there, though, because they haven't been able to get to sanctuaries yet because it takes so much time to build and fundraise and prepare for those animals. But the numbers of monkeys in laboratories are much, much higher. And that's a concern. There is nowhere for them to go when these studies are over, not to mention the concerns about what's happening to them while they're in research.
Right. Now, so when did the testing of chimpanzees end? Testing on chimpanzees end?
In 2015, the National Institutes of Health had announced that they would cease funding chimpanzee research. And it was a slow end. There were many advocates working to end this for decades. And when it finally happened, it was such a celebration. But then, of course, everyone who knew anything about this realized, there's still a lot of work ahead of us to get the chimps physically out of the laboratory. They may be living there and not being tested on, and that's better. That's an improvement, but they're still not at a sanctuary. So, then there were sanctuaries that sort of had to shift, and a new sanctuary was even formed to meet that need, to get all the, at that point, there were hundreds of chimpanzees in laboratories to slowly get them out. And so, so the NAPSA member sanctuaries are very involved in that. And that's why our number of sanctuary residents continues to climb every year. Right now, we're mostly chimpanzees in our sanctuaries because that's who's coming out of the captive environments in the highest numbers right now.
Right. So when the NIH made that determination that we no longer need to experiment on chimpanzees for advancing scientific knowledge, what reason did they give?
Well, again, I'm not a scientist and I don't want to get this wrong, but I can tell you that chimpanzees were bred in very high numbers in the late 80s, early 90s for AIDS research. That was a big concern. And then it was determined that chimps don't respond in the same way to the HIV virus as humans do. And they
Well,
just
yeah.
weren't needed, right? So they were considered a surplus material of the laboratories. And then they live, they can live in captivity 50 years.
Right.
So and they can't just be placed anywhere, so that's why the sanctuaries are so full right now, and why when a place like the Wildlife Way Station, which was, it was an unaccredited sanctuary, it was not in NAPSA, it was a refuge that did the best it could until it couldn't anymore, and then there was no solution. So I know one of the long-term things that the sanctuary community is looking at is, if God forbid this happens again to another facility, we need to try to find a system in place to respond more quickly, to provide solutions, because unfortunately, it could happen again, I suppose. These are
Well,
all
yeah.
nonprofit organizations, and it was a challenging year for everyone. 2 years
Right.
maybe now with COVID, so
Right.
they just couldn't keep going. And so we had no choice but to react and get those animals out. Where they're living right now, they are at risk of the wildfires that are so detrimental to the area and so pervasive. There's the risk of money running out to provide for their immediate needs. So it's very dire. And that's one reason why we were so grateful that Sean Monson and then Joaquin Phoenix and Rooney Mara stepped in to help use their voices to get the word out to new audiences, because so many people don't even know this is happening. And I think a lot of people think, well, why can't you just send them to a zoo or put them in another sanctuary? And there just isn't space. I mean, even zoos, there is no more space for chimpanzees right now. And it's a problem, because these chimpanzees are there because of humans. These were not born in the wild. They were bred by humans, used by humans, left there by humans, and now humans have to solve the problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's partly sort of institutional and systemic. You pointed out that we raised a bunch of chimpanzees to test them for AIDS drugs in the 80s and 90s, right?
Yes.
And I mean, and then we discovered that the drugs don't react the same way on chimpanzees as they do on human beings. This is a lesson that we keep learning over and over and over and over. Okay. And it is sad that it takes scientists at the National Institutes of Health decades to figure out what is right in front of their noses. Right. I mean, it is not only sad, it is unconscionable, especially in this time and age.
Well, yeah. And,
Yeah.
now we're raising a lot of money to rescue these chimps.
Right.
NAPSA has never done anything like this before. We are a smaller organization. I'm the only employee, right?
Oh,
So
wow.
everyone else, we were fortunate to get grants to pay for fundraising consultants and,
Right.
public relations consultants to help get this going. But it's a big problem. And there needs to be more supportive sanctuaries. There needs to be more funding for them, because they are solving a problem that they did not create.
Right.
They want to do this, of course, this is what they were founded for, but it has to work. The system has to work. And when there's money available to breed these animals and to use them and to profit off of them for, pet trade, lab research, entertainment, it's all money.
Right.
They're all just a means to that end. So then there absolutely has to be money for their lifetime care. That's only logical. I mean, so it's very frustrating. And the sanctuaries that are accredited and that are reputable have to limit how many animals they take in. That's why they couldn't all help. And that's smart
Right.
because we don't want anyone else getting overburdened and having to shut unexpectedly, There's a
Right.
limit to what these places can do.
And also, I mean, I was looking at the way they live in these sanctuaries, and they're all in cages. I mean, they really cannot be out in the out in the open in the wild, right?
Right. It's still captivity, and no
Still
one claims
captivity.
that it's not.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of sanctuaries like to say that it's the next best thing to life in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
So what they get at a sanctuary is choice.
Mm-hmm.
They have options for how to spend their day. So for those animals that want to be outside and in the grass, they can do that.
Right.
But if it's
Right.
someone who is more solitary and doesn't want to be sociable, maybe wants to be alone, maybe wants to take a nap, they can do that too.
Right.
Um, they provide fantastic enrichment for these animals because primates are so smart and they
Right.
need that mental stimulation, especially when they're not living in the wild. Right? In the
Right.
wild, you might be hunting and looking for bugs and getting leaves and all these diverse things that aren't always going to be an option in a sanctuary. So
Right.
the enrichment becomes very important, as well as the
Mm-hmm.
veterinary care. And there's a lot that goes into keeping these animals healthy and happy.
Right.
Um, Especially when they arrive with issues from what happened to them before.
Right.
That can be anything from depression to self-harm to physical, amputations, teeth
Mm-hmm.
being removed, all sorts of terrible things that result from a life in captivity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so there's a real, it's almost, it's a rehabilitation once they get to sanctuaries.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, when the NIH said in 2015 that we will no longer allow experimentation on chimpanzees, did the NIH allocate money for sanctuaries to take these chimpanzees?
Well, the NIH, so the chimpanzees in laboratories are either owned by the NIH or they are privately owned by other entities,
Mm-hmm.
laboratories. There is a system in place that identified one NAPSA member sanctuary called Chimp Haven as the National Chimpanzee Sanctuary. And what
Okay.
that means is that Chimp Haven is the place where all the federally owned chimpanzees are retired to. They do receive some funding from the NIH, but not all. I believe it's 75% of the animal's care, but not the costs of building the enclosures and the grounds, maintenance. And I'm 99% sure that's accurate, and you can always go to
Mm.
chimphaven.org to learn more about how that works.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So, but then the privately owned chimps
Mm-hmm.
go to other sanctuaries, and there is not federal funding for that. Just like there is not federal funding for monkeys coming from laboratories,
Right.
um, many of which are funded by NIH grants for research projects. But that money doesn't get to sanctuaries. So the sanctuaries are fully reliant on the individual agreements that they have in
Mm-hmm.
place with these laboratories retiring animals. And then, excuse me, they receive funding from grants, from foundations, from the general public.
Mm-hmm.
And it's challenging. And they're, a true sanctuary is nonprofit.
Right.
So they're not open to the public. They don't
Right.
have ticket sales. They don't
Right. Right.
earn any money from these animals, as they shouldn't, because these animals, have their own, they need
Yeah.
to be autonomous and not used for any purposes. So it's a big challenge. And that is also why there's still chimpanzees in laboratories right now. There just
Right.
hasn't been enough funding and space to move them all out. And then we have
Mm-hmm.
something like the wildlife waste station shutting down, putting an additional strain on
Right.
the resources. So it's been a very challenging few years since the waste station shut down. And I know a lot of people that will be very happy and relieved when the last chimpanzee leaves. We will get there. Right now, we're looking at mid 2022, and we might
I
be
see.
all
Mm-hmm.
done, but that's, of course, pending the speed of fundraising.
Right. Right. No, I hear you. And I'm, my heart is so touched by what you're all going through. But uh, I'm focusing on the systemic nature of this. Okay. Because
Yeah,
it's just, if we keep patching up the symptoms, you're just going to keep getting more and more of the same problems over and over.
exactly.
And Ray has written in the comments that it's not just sad, it's criminal that the NIH and other institutions continue such barbaric and inefficient means of testing. I mean, if they have determined that testing on chimpanzees is useless, why are they allowing Why are they giving grants for testing on monkeys, testing on rabbits, testing on other animals who are
Right.
further away from human beings than chimpanzees?
Right.
So if it doesn't work, if chimpanzees are not going to give us reliable data, how the heck do they expect other animals to give us reliable data? This is, this is science 101.
Well, yeah, and there's some amazing organizations working on those very topics.
Right.
White coat waste is one that we've worked with, and a lot of these organizations then work with NAPSA and with the sanctuaries to solve problems involving particular groups of animals. But they're also, of course, focused, like you said, on this systemic change that needs to happen for a brighter future for all of us, because this is just a very archaic and antiquated system of use, and it's not sustainable. It can't continue.
Well, it seems to me it's more 19th century science that's being used in the 21st century. Okay.
Mhm.
Just along with this. This who ought to know better are just going on with it. It's not just the NIH. I mean, look at all the universities that are participating in this. All there is money in it, right? There are grants available to universities. They go along with this fiction that experimenting on animals is somehow going to benefit human beings.
Well, right,
Yeah.
right, and it takes a public education campaign and a public awakening to
Hmm.
really get that change going, right? Because I think a lot of people, when we talk about, and obviously this involves many other species as well, but when I talk about monkeys and apes that are
Right.
involved in these types of problems, when I really am honest with people about how this impacts the animal and what their life is like and what the purpose of it all is,
Hmm.
they understand right away. It's not hard to have the empathy and to put yourself in their shoes and say, yeah, this, I don't feel good about this. This doesn't make sense. This
Right.
isn't what I want to support,
Hmm.
exploitation of primates or of other species. So I think your podcast and these types of programs are really important because it helps people see the progress being made and also what still needs to be done, because we need everyone on board to make
Right.
these changes happen.
Now I'm just, I'm focusing on NIH and institutions like that
Yeah.
because, this they are they are absolutely responsible, and it's actually criminal. Ray is right. It's criminal that they are keeping the pretense going,
Hmm.
pretense that they are something real money, you know, by funding these experiments. And I mean, once they acknowledge that we shouldn't be doing it to chimpanzees because it's useless, and then they also know, I mean, are they aware of the Center for Contemporary Sciences? That doctor started this, where they show you that uh, there is technology available now that you can use for testing that's much more accurate. I mean, it's the exact opposite. I mean, I think experimenting on animals is 95% inaccurate, whereas
Right.
experimenting on human tissues is 95% accurate. It's something like that. It's like a vast difference in effectiveness
Yeah.
of
Well, what we need is the
use of
next
scientific
generation
method.
to focus on those solutions and to,
Yeah.
move past. I think a lot of what has been done is it just sort of continues because that's the way things are. This is what we do.
Right.
We test on monkeys. This is the process. But
Right.
the newer generations don't need to take that. They can do better.
Yeah. I mean, we need to change the education system then, right? So we need to tell the students there's no point in experimenting on animals. I mean, what the
Right.
heck are you doing? You're wasting your time.
Oh
In the
yeah.
same way, we have this entire department of sustainability in ASU and other places that don't even talk about food. I mean, you say, what the heck? What kind of sustainability is this that you're teaching people, right? So I've
Yeah.
told students that when you pay universities your own money and you're actually getting loans to pay universities, you need to demand that the education is valid, right?
Right.
Otherwise, they're ripping you off.
Well, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. A change, so many changes need to take place, right, before everything is the way we need it to be. So we're just chipping away at it where we can, and that's sort of where NAPSA comes in. We can step
Yeah.
in and, we're not the experts who can change how research is done, but we can be there for these animals when they need us and when they need a better life, and we can educate the public on what that life is so that
Right.
hopefully future generations of monkeys and apes aren't born in the laboratories.
Yeah. I mean, you just healed my resolve to go and make sure that this should stand, that this
Mm-hmm.
need end as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Can people help you? Chimpanzeesinneed.org, is that the
Yeah, so the Chimps in Need campaign has a webpage. It's chimpsinneed.org. So maybe you can link to that when you post this.
uh-huh.
You can also access it from NAPSA's website, which is primatesanctuaries.org. And we have a little tab that says Chimpanzees in Need. And quite frankly, what we need to rescue the remaining chimps at the wildlife waste station is help spreading the word and money so that the sanctuaries can continue building and preparing to welcome these chimps.
Hmm.
So, I mean, truly, so there's 26 there right now. We can have 15 moved this fall, let's say by December. With a little luck and some money coming in, we can make that happen. And then we can move the remaining 11 in early 2022. And then we can be done. And, you know, it's been such a village that has sprung up on behalf of these chimpanzees, and it's so rewarding when they are rehomed. Um, we just had a special air on NBC in San Diego, and it will start airing throughout the country now. It's called Down to Earth with Dagmar. And
Mm-hmm.
Dagmar Midcap is a journalist who felt moved by the chimpanzees' stories. And so she did a 30-minute special that will be airing, and everyone should be able to see it online. It's on chimpsinneed.org. They can also then hopefully see it on NBC near them soon. And it shows the transport of a group of 6 chimpanzees from the way station to
Mm.
a sanctuary in Washington state. And it's just, tears. These beings need our help. They deserve our help. They did not deserve the life that was handed to them, but
Right.
we are here to help them. And I really appreciate you and everyone listening who feel moved to help us rescue these chimpanzees in need.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the work that you do day in and day out. I know it must be hard, and I want you to know that there are a lot of us here who have your back.
Thank you. That means more than you know. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I I mean, it is heartbreaking to see what they are going through and what you are going through.
It is, but you know what? In a little bit of time, and if we keep pushing, we'll get them out, and then we're gonna celebrate like you've never seen before.
Wonderful.
What a relief that will be. Yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you, and thank you to everyone who's donated. I mean, the generosity is just overwhelming, and all the money raised goes directly to the chimps. It's not paying any humans. It's not going to any other purposes. It's just going to the chimpanzees' needs and their rescue. So thank you to anyone who can help. I'm here to answer any questions. You can contact me through NAPSA's website at primatesanctuaries.org.
Can you hear me?
I can now. I'm sorry it froze. I can hear you now.
Yes. Okay. No, I doing that. Um, with internet connections.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you heard me. If not, we can put the links up after the fact.
Yeah, North American Primate Sanctuary
Yes.
Alliance.
North American Primate Sanctuary Alliance.
And who are the celebrities who have been helping you?
Well, the
Joaquin
most
Phoenix and Mara, of course.
right. That was amazing. We had Elaine Hendricks. We had support from her. She's an actress. And then some other actors and actresses that
Mm-hmm.
she, introduced us to. but we could use more. So if we have any superstars listening, we've had Leonardo DiCaprio share our posts, but we'd love to get more going. Dr. Jane Goodall, of course, is supportive, and she released a video that we have on our website. She is probably the biggest superstar expert that's helped us out so far. And it takes a village. That's what we keep saying. So we're just grateful for everyone who's in that village.
So it's a question for you. Communicate with chimpanzees.
Well, that varies by the chimpanzee. They're of course not born knowing any of our languages, but when they've been living in captivity, they are very good at learning to communicate with humans. They're so smart. And so there's chimpanzees at the wildlife way station right now that not only respond to English, but can use sign language and communicate with their caregivers that way. And there's even one that knows Spanish because the caregivers spoke to her in Spanish. So I can't even tell you how smart they are. They're like a small child. And so at the same time, they're very strong and demanding, and they have sort of the rebellious nature of a teenager. So their care is very complex. And that's why having their long-term caregivers still on site to meet their needs and comfort them and give them a sense of safety is so important and amazing. And we continue to be very grateful for that as well.
Yeah, I heard that they are 5 to 6 times stronger than a human being.
That is correct.
Wow.
When you see them, it's called a display. When the chimpanzees get very loud and throw things and bang on things, there is no doubt in your mind that these are very, very strong, powerful creatures. And at the same time, they can be so sensitive and sweet, and they're just a dramatic sort of species, and they're each so different. So when I go to the way station to see them, it's really neat to see their different personalities come out. There's one chimpanzee who has a very loud vocalization, and he almost sounds like a lion roaring, and they think it's because a lion actually used to live at the wildlife way station, and they think he's mimicking what the lion would do, which is just crazy. But then there's others that will just talk to you by pointing. One was showing me his foot and talking to me about that, and I'd say, show me your toes, and he'll show you his toes. And they're individual beings that truly have their own interests and desires and thoughts, and it's an honor to try to help them and get them to safety. It really is.
Do they verbalize?
It's cutting out. I can't hear.
Communicate among themselves? Do they communicate among themselves?
Do they communicate amongst themselves? They do. Absolutely. They do. And some of that is through vocalizations that you can hear. A lot of it's through body language and just a look or a mouth movement or the way they're breathing. Even when they go to play, there's a certain like breathy pant they do when they're excited. And it's like, like that. And that's like a playful sort of thing. So they absolutely communicate, and they're very social beings, which is why we are dedicated to moving their social groups intact. We're not breaking apart, family units or social groups in any way, because it's in their best interest to stay with those groups with whom they've developed relationships. So we want to respect that.
Erica, do you hear me? Has one decoded any scientists come to study their language?
Say that one more time.
Has anyone decoded their language?
Has anyone
decoded their language?
Yes. I'm not the one who has done that, but there's been starting in the 1970s, there was a lot of research involving sign language with chimpanzees to better understand their abilities and thought processes and that type of thing. So yes, there have been studies on how they communicate, what they say, and why, but I'm not the best expert on describing that right now to you.
Right, right, right. No, no, I understand.
Yeah.
Now I was curious because there's a professor in Northern Arizona University who decoded the language of the prairie dog,
Mm,
and he spent 20
fascinating.
years to do that, and
Wow.
and he discovered that actually they have a very complex language and very sophisticated language, that in a
Yes.
30-second chirp or something like that, they're able to communicate to the rest of the troop that this guy who came 2 days ago is back again, and this time is wearing a green shirt instead of a blue shirt. I mean,
Uh-huh.
all that complex knowledge is being conveyed in a 30-second chirp.
Well, yeah, I
Um,
believe that absolutely. And chimps are the same way.
mm,
They have preferences and they will ask for their favorite things. I
mm.
know at one sanctuary in Washington, there's a chimpanzee who really likes cowboy boots. And she will demand that the caregivers put on cowboy boots and go for a walk with her. And it's just funny to see what strikes their interest. They're
Mm.
just like you and I, they might like one color more than another, or some of them, if they've had a bad experience with, let's say, a blonde woman, they won't like blonde women, so there's very lasting preferences that makes each one of them truly an individual. And that's
Right.
what's so cool about sanctuaries, is they have the ability to meet those needs and to get cowboy boots if someone really likes cowboy boots, and collect them, and then donors send all these cowboy boots. So it's really cute. It's the least we can do for these animals, right?
Yeah. So the humans who are basically working in these sanctuaries, they become like custodians, the caretakers of the animals, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, almost like a parent relationship, or
Mm-hmm.
friend, or a mix.
Mm-hmm.
But they really become close with these animals because they're, it's a bit of a conflict, only because they don't want to see these animals enclosed. They
Right.
wish they could just run off and go be wild and do whatever they want, but it's just not possible. So they do the best that they can to make these animals' lives interesting and fun and comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and healthy. So that means always being creative with what is done to keep their lives entertaining and healthy. And I mean, they throw them little birthday parties sometimes, and like,
Mm-hmm.
even that sounds silly to you or I, but it makes the day unique, and it stimulates them in new ways. And so they're
Right.
always looking for those types of activities, to meet the needs of these animals and make their lives a happy one for as long as
That's,
possible.
yeah.
So, even if an animal passes away 1 year after reaching a sanctuary, it's like, oh, at least they got that year of retirement to relax and be with others. Some sanctuary residents have never been around others of their own kind. So that can be very challenging too, because while they are very social species, if a chimpanzee has never seen another chimpanzee, it can be terrifying for them to do that the first time. So there's a very careful process when it comes to socializing them and finding out which groups of chimps work together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it can be turbulent, and there's a real science to it. So
Mm-hmm.
that's always something challenging at sanctuaries, is socializing in the best way possible for everyone.
So does this mean that the breeding of chimpanzees has stopped? The human breeding of chimpanzees?
Virtually, there are a very small handful of private owners of chimpanzees in the US who could potentially still be breeding them, but we don't think they are. So time will tell. As states increasingly restrict the private ownership of primates, or of chimpanzees specifically, that is extremely limited. And there's only a small number of states where this could even be possible. But right now, it is still technically possible that they could be being bred in private ownership. I'm not talking about zoos. That's an entirely different system. But for the pet trade, I believe the breeding has stopped, but we will see. And it looks like we lost him. Oh, no. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I'm afraid I have to take off anyway right around now. Thank you for listening. If you have any more information, you can visit Chimps in Need. I'm sorry, if you have any more questions for more information, you can visit chimpsinneed.org.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you for being here. So sorry,
Thank
my
you.
internet cut off, though I couldn't figure out
I
why.
I see that it's a bit spotty. And I was just saying I actually have to head off for another phone call around now.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for being here, and best of luck. And we will be here with you. Okay, we are
Thank you
here with
so
you.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you for your support. Bye bye.
Bye bye.